Hi, Samuel Leeds here, and I am out in London at Costa Coffee with the auction king. It is Mr. Piotr.
Hello everyone.
So in this interview you're going to learn all about auction properties, so stay tuned. Okay, so let me welcome you to Piotr. How's it going, buddy?
Hi Samuel, it's all good, thanks.
Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I'm a London-based property investor and my speciality is property auctions. I buy in auctions and sell in auctions as well.
One of the first things that a lot of people, certainly I used to think about auctions, buying properties cheap from an auction is a myth. Because in auctions people get greedy.
Yeah.
So what would you say to that?
You need to know how to buy properties well in the auction because it's easy to get emotionally attached to a property, and then auctions are set up in such a way that if you want to offer a lot of money you can do that very quickly, and a lot of people fall for that, so a lot of people overpays for properties in the auctions. But there are certain properties that people are scared of, or they don't know how to solve certain problems, and you can get really good deals on those properties if you know how to solve problems and if you know how to buy them as well.
Okay, that's great. I mean, would you be able to just tell us a little bit about how you got into property and give us a feel for, I mean, you don't sound like you're from England.
I'm not actually.
Originally from
Poland.
Poland,
Yes.
Jak się masz. Excellent. So how did you transition from living in Poland to being a successful property investor in England?
So that was quite a long and twisted journey. I came to the UK 12 years ago, and my dream was to study in the UK, and actually one of my universities of choice was Aberdeen for various reasons. And I went to study at Aberdeen about 11 years ago. I graduated from there and I wanted to come to London to find a job. Before coming to London, I went for a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And over there I met someone who offered me a job in properties in London, and
Correct.
I started sourcing properties for investors in London.
So you started off just working as a job, as an employee?
Yeah, exactly.
And what were you doing exactly?
So my first role was to actually go to auctions and look at what's happening and speak to investors who bought properties, offer them some brokering services for bridging.
Okay.
So that was my first couple of months.
So you had a job working in auctions?
Yeah, I would go to auctions, yes.
Great.
That was my first experience of auctions. It was 6 years ago, and then my role kind of transitioned, and I was speaking with agents, trying to find deals in Paddington, Maida Vale, St John's Wood, those areas.
Yeah.
And we had a pool of investors who were looking for the properties there, and we kind of had like a turnkey solution. We'd find the property, find tenants, manage them, and that would be my kind of role.
That's excellent.
Yeah, so it was a really good training in sort of basic property fundamentals.
Yeah, so you told me another time that buying from estate agents is like playing football,
Yes.
but buying from auctions is like playing basketball.
Yes.
And the rules are very different. What are the key differences between buying from an estate agent and buying from an auction?
So the key differences is in the fact that in the auction, when you make an offer, that offer you need to basically follow it up with a 10% deposit pretty much straight away.
Yeah.
So in the auction, you get the legal pack in advance, you get everything in advance, you do your due diligence, and then you need to pay the deposit as soon as you make an offer.
Yeah.
And that's basically the main difference. So the process is really quick, it's streamlined, and the sellers are totally committed to sell the property because they already signed the terms with the auctioneer, and if they withdraw it, they have to pay the fee. We see they don't want to pay the fee, they want to sell the property, so they would think twice about signing the terms and conditions. And with an estate agents, you get people who basically test the market. They try to put the property at a certain price, see if they can get it,
Yeah.
and usually it's a really high price. In the auction, everything starts really low because it starts with the reserve, so the minimum amount that the seller is prepared to sell for, and that is usually quite low. So then in the auction, that price kind of goes up. So when you make an offer for an auction property, it tends to be above the guide price.
Yeah.
And with the estate agents, you normally make an offer below the asking price, right?
Yes.
So that is the kind of main difference. It's a totally different dynamics.
Yeah.
Like you said, different sports have different rules.
Exactly.
And estate agents is like one sport, auctions is a different sport, even though a property is a common thing, like a ball could be a common thing in different sports, but the rules are different and you need to know how to play different rules.
That's great. So if you were to go to an auction, what kind of auction would be the best type to go to? Would it be a property that you found on Rightmove and then it's for sale via auction, or is there a different way?
So there are various ways. You can obviously randomly find a property on Rightmove and it's in the auction, and then you go to that auction. Or you can be a little bit more structured about this. So if you know or you want to find something in the auction, you can either follow an auction that's your local auction and review the catalogs, go to the auction, have a kind of like a look, what it looks like, what the process is like. Or you can sign up for, if you want to really take it to a next level, you can sign up to Essential Information Group. That's like a portal. It's like a Rightmove for auctions. All the auctioneers are there, all the auction properties are there, and you can see everything sort of on your screen, basically in one place, easy to find. So that's what I use for finding properties. I use EI Group because it just makes it streamlined and easier.
And that's EI Group?
eigroup.co.uk, so I think that's the address you can find it at, and it's called Essential Information Group.
So you're on EI Group, you're looking at all the properties, or you're on Rightmove.
Yes.
What specifically are you looking for?
So I'll be looking at properties that have potential to add value, and properties that potentially can be problematic. Because I like properties that would put other people off. And if we know how to solve the problems that put other people off, then we don't really have that much competition in the buying process. So that's really.
And what kind of problems would they be?
It could be a freehold house converted into 3 flats by the seller 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and that's never had planning. Some people don't know how to deal with those properties, but we know everything sort of from the legal point, how to solve those problems. So we're able to buy properties like that with confidence that we can get the planning. And that basically means that we have less competition and we can buy properties for less money.
Do you not think that's a little bit risky though? Because if you're buying properties where the owner has given up trying to get planning permission or whatever it is, there's a big problem and they've given up, and then you're taking on that problem, unless you're pretty damn confident that you can solve the problem, is that not a bit risky? Could you not end up getting your fingers badly burned with that strategy?
It's so, on the face of it, it looks risky, but if you have the right knowledge, it's just a matter of following the process. And obviously every property transaction is risky. Like even if you buy from an estate agent, it is risky. It's just the risks are not so apparent. In auctions, those risks are more sort of exposed. They're there.
Especially if you've got to pay a deposit up front. I mean, what kind of due diligence would you do before going to an auction?
Definitely, I would check the property history on EI Group. So EI Group offers like a history going back 25 years of a given street or given property. So we can see whether that property is already in the auction. We can see what it sold for in the past, and whether it was withdrawn, whether it was unsold. So this is the first thing that I would check. Then I would check the planning history. What's been the planning history? Whether there's been any records. I would check what the resale prices for the flats that we could get in that property and what the GDV is. And then I would calculate the cost, and I would end up with the price that we're happy to pay.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've got to do quite a lot of due diligence before going to an auction.
Yes, yeah.
And how do you check if there's a property and it's currently being used as 3 flats? And you're thinking you need to get planning permission, but the current owner hasn't or can't get planning permission. How do you check whether you can definitely get planning permission on that?
Well, I don't want to reveal all my trade secrets, but there's certain steps that you can take with a property like that. So one is you need to check for how long this property has been like that. If
Yeah.
it's over 4 years and there's been no enforcement notices, then there's likelihood that you will be able to get planning on it. Then you need to check whether this property has been used like that for continuously for over 4 years. And if it was, and if it's got like separate meters, or you can prove it with bills or tenancy agreements, then there's a certain process that you can go through with the planning that will allow you to get the planning basically.
Yeah. So if it's been like that for more than 4 years,
Yeah,
it's usually very easy to get planning permission.
that's correct, yeah.
There we go, a little tip there. We're getting all his secrets from him now. We're rinsing them out.
Yeah, I know, you're pulling it off.
No, that's excellent. So what would you say the main advantages to buying from an auction are versus buying off market or from an estate agent?
So one thing is the properties are being offered at very low prices, usually at around 20 to 30% discount
Yeah.
from what they would offer with an estate agent. If there is no competition, then you're able to buy it cheap,
Yeah.
and the sellers are committed. So you know that the seller is not going to
Yeah.
pull out from the transaction in a month or so.
Sure.
So, those are the main things that I would say are critical. And from sort of my experience as well for buyers, it's really good that the transaction happens quickly and all the information are presented up front. Because as long as we do our work, and normally we do our work,
Yeah.
then we know that the deal is there to be done and it can proceed quickly.
Yeah. Another question is, I know a guy and his strategy is to buy rundown properties from Rightmove
Yeah,
and then put them on an auction,
yeah,
and greedy builders get into bidding wars and they end up selling for more
Yeah.
on an auction than they would on Rightmove.
Yeah.
So my question is, how do you distinguish between an auction motivated seller where you're going to be able to get a good discount versus an auction seller who is just trying to get the maximum they can, and it's just going to be surrounded, the room is going to be filled with macho bidding war type people? How do you make sure that you don't end up wasting your time going to auctions whereby they end up selling for much more than they're even worth?
Main thing is no one knows. Even engineers don't know. Sometimes they can't guess what the property is going to be like in the auction room. Some properties seem very quiet, and then there's 2 people bidding for it, twice double the guide price.
Yeah.
And some properties seem quite busy and they don't attract that many people. So one of the main things that I do to protect myself from, like you said, wasting time going to auctions and then losing the bidding,
Yeah.
because that's normally what happens in my case. I win maybe 5% auction bidding in the room.
Yeah.
So I focus on buying properties before the auction. That is the place where if it's approached well and if we send professional offers, then it's easier to get properties.
Okay, excellent. So if you go to an auction, you're going to have a maximum price that you'll go to, and you don't go above that at all?
Yes.
Even a pound above it? How strict are you on that?
Depends.
But you're pretty
Depends.
strict on it.
Yeah, we're pretty strict on it. Maybe we can go up 1,000, 2,000,
Yeah.
5,000 pounds. Depends on the property.
Okay, but you're not going to go way above what you decided.
No.
But usually you're going to try and buy a property before auction day.
Yes.
How do you do that? How do the owners and the agents not just say arrive on the day? I mean, how do you put together a professional offer which is going to be considered or even accepted without turning up to the auction?
Yeah, well, that all starts with understanding how auctions work and what the seller motivations are to sell in the auction. The various types of sellers in the auction. There are private sellers like you and me that put property into the auction and they want to sell it. There are institutional sellers like councils, for example, or government organization, and they put the property into the auction basically not to get the best price, although they want to get the best price, but they're risking it might sell for less than it would sell with an estate agent. But what they want is they want the transparency. That's the main thing for them. So those type of sellers would never accept pre-auction offer because they need transparency. The transparency is achieved in the room. But private sellers or sort of receivers perhaps or things like that, sellers like that, they can accept pre-auction offers because they know they have certain goal in mind, and if the offer is in line with their goal, then they might just take it. Or they're risking the property being sold in the auction at the reserve price.
Yeah.
So we tend to offer somewhere where we think the reserve is something above that.
Sure. So if the reserve price is 200,000, you might offer 220,000.
Correct.
Outside of the auction.
Yes.
Is it a numbers game, or do you specifically target certain sellers?
So we target certain sellers, and it's a numbers game.
Yes.
Because even though the seller might accept pre-auction offer, the dynamics are different.
How do you find those private sellers that might be likely to say yes?
So you just look at the properties you like, and then you make offers.
Okay, so
And if you see that the property is being sold by the council or by a government organisation, you just don't bother.
And is that usually on the description, is it?
It is, yeah.
Sure. So
or somewhere in the legal park.
Sure. So you're going to find properties that you like. You're going to make sure that they're being sold privately, and then you're going to write to them and put an offer in.
We will do that from auctioneer. So
yes.
Yeah.
Is there a particular skill to putting in the offer? Is there a particular wording that you can use?
And I think it's not so much about the wording, it's about sort of conveying that you are ready to exchange today.
Sure.
So the way you make offer in the auction is like you need to have done your due diligence, and then you're coming in making an offer saying, we want to buy this for 220,000, we are ready to exchange today, and put down 10% deposit.
And then that's really clever. So you're going to find a property you like, you're going to make sure it's being sold privately, you're then going to do your due diligence. What does your due diligence typically consist of?
So as I said before, it's checking the history of the property, whether it's been in auctions before.
And where do you find the history?
That's on EI Group, Essential Informations Group. So it's eigroup.co.uk. Full history of all the auctions in the last 25 years.
Yes.
And all the properties that's been there. And that's really a gold mine of information for me.
So you can just do that online on the website?
Yeah.
Anything else?
I would check all the right move information about flats or houses that are selling within.
Yes. So you'll find the sold houses to see how much it's worth.
Yes.
The rentability.
Yes.
Do you actually view the property before you offer?
We do view those properties, yes, most of them.
So if a property is on an auction, can you still just go and view it fine, normal?
Yes, you can.
So you'll view it, and who do you normally view it with? Do you bring a builder, or do you go on your own?
It depends on the property, but I would bring someone. Either I would go myself and then do a video. I like doing videos of properties because I can come back to whatever I missed, and then I'll show it to someone who I think should see it and give me some advice. But apart from that, I don't really bring too many people to viewings.
Excellent. So Piotr, you've given an awful lot of value so far about auctions and how to find properties from an auction, how to do your due diligence. Give us an example of what a typical case study might look like once you've bought a property from an auction.
Okay, great. So there was a property that we purchased, and that was a flat in southeast London, a 2-bedroom flat. It came with a tenant, and we had to check basically the tenancy agreement. We had to check the legal part, what it said, and the special conditions, because the special conditions are the key element of each sale in the auction. And we checked what are the terms of the sale, and we checked what the sale values with an agent, local agent. Actually, there was 3 agents that we checked the values with, and we also checked with some building professionals on how much it would cost to refurbish the property. So there was all that due diligence on the legal aspects, on the resale aspects, and also on making it look beautiful. Okay, so what were the figures? How much did you buy it for? What were the after figures? So the property was purchased for 290,000.
Yep.
There was including all purchase costs, we spent 65k on the transaction. So the total cost was 355, and we sold the property for 403,000. So it was 48k profit.
Yeah.
In the transaction within 6 months. So that was quite good.
So £48,000 within 6 months. Did you have to pay stamp duty though with that?
Yes, that was the stamp duty was paid within that 65k.
So you included the stamp duty with that?
Everything was
so there's £48,000 clean profit?
Clean net profit.
That's not bad within 6 months.
That was pretty good transaction.
So you're all about buying and selling from auction?
No, I'm about finding deals in auctions and finding how they could make money. So there's certain deals that are better for holding, like a 9-bedroom HMO in Portsmouth that I found a few months ago. So that was purchased for 405,000. It's about 55k spent on it, and it's bringing about 57k income per annum. So the value of it is around 575. So for the investor, it's a matter of whether to hold it and just keep the cash flow coming, or whether to sell it and make about 100k. So each property is different. And
that's incredible. So either make 100k or make £57,000 per year gross.
That's correct.
Awesome. Well, you've given a lot of value.
Sure.
You've spoken about how to find properties on auction, what websites to use, what due diligence to look for, what kind of problems to look for.
Yes.
Apart from title splitting, so you mentioned about how there could be a problem if they can't get planning permission.
Yeah.
What other problems could there be?
Another problem could be no building control sign-offs. Another problem could be tenants with no tenancy agreements.
Yes.
It could be short leases.
What's that?
Short leases.
Short leases. Okay,
Yes.
meaning.
Like it tends to happen in London when there is a leasehold flat and it's called 56-year lease, for example.
So you need to renew the lease.
You need to renew the lease, find out the value, how much
Yeah.
it costs, and so that's another problem. There's lots of problems.
So you just love taking on people's problems
I
and
love
solving
the problems that we can solve.
How do you find properties with problems? Does it normally say on the write-up what the problem is?
No, so the problem usually comes up in the legal due diligence process, and also looking at what the lenders would require to finance the property.
Sure. So it's not just in the description?
No, it's not.
So it does take some real work.
It takes real work.
So what would you say, Piotr, to someone watching this video who's thinking 48 grand in 6 months, not bad, and they would love to get into buying from auction, but they've never done it, don't know where to start? What first steps, initial advice, and the advice could be just don't. Educate yourself.
Yes.
I mean, what advice would you give?
So one thing is definitely do some dry runs at auctions, go to auctions, have a feel for it. Definitely speak with someone who's done auctions before, because they'll have experience, they've done mistakes, they experienced some things that you might not want to go into. And also get lawyers and kind of your power team that is familiar with auctions, because it's a different process.
Excellent.
And also educate yourself, get the fundamentals of auctions right, and with that you'll be able to find your own answers.
Incredible. Piotr, if someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to contact you?
There are various ways. They can find me on LinkedIn, Piotr Rusinek, and they can find me on Facebook, also the same name. And also I've got a YouTube channel, Auction News TV, that people can find me on. And there's my website, company website, synergy-pp.com.
Synergy-pp.com. So check him out. I hope that's been helpful. I know I've certainly learnt a lot having breakfast with you and chatting with you right now. So thanks ever so much.
Thanks very much, Samia, and I hope there's been no value.
See you soon.